Are you tired of primitive methods of converting raw materials into your desired products? Do you spend hours of your time just to make one part? Are your design plans falling apart at the seams? Introducing Processes of Manufacturing. One main manufacturing process is casting. Casting is where a liquid is poured into a mold where it solidifies. Here is a demonstration of a model preparing to create a mold by
force it in as deep as you can.
Once a resin is poured and cooled into the mold, you are left with a near-perfect replica. Casting allows you to make weird shapes that would take a lot longer to be tooled to make. Casting is usually done on glass, plastic, or metals. The precision and tolerances on casting are really dependent on the mold. The cost of casting is cheap since most molds are reusable and there is little to no material waste. The time needed depends on the material being cast and the surface finish required.
Another main group of manufacturing process is forming and shaping. This group includes processes such as rolling, while drawing produces fencing, wires used for cables and springs, extrusion, and forging. Forging can produce crankshafts, connecting rods, turbine discs, and gears. Forming techniques utilize suitable stresses to induce plastic deformation in the raw material to form it into a specific shape. The workpiece is reshaped without adding or removing material, and its mass remains unchanged. Plastic solids are heated up to melt the polymers before they are shaped, while metal solids stay in a solid state the whole process. Depending on the specific process, shapes may vary. Ceramics, metals, and plastics are all often formed and shaped. Certain shapes call for a certain level of precision, such as drawing a wire of a specific diameter. Ceramics require high heat and special accommodations that metal don't usually require. These processes are typically more expensive, but quickly decrease in costs as they are produced in larger volumes. Depending on the material and the process, skill level and time needed varies.
Machining is another group of processes that can be divided into two categories: turning and milling. Turning operations rotate a piece of raw material while the user is either in control of or holding a cutting tool that removes material while the piece is being rotated. Milling is the opposite of turning, in that in turning, the workpiece is rotating, and in milling, the cutting tool spins into a stationary workpiece. Drilling can be done by lowering the rotating cutting tool's edges into contact with the workpiece. This can be done both on lathes and milling machines. Considering the multiple different types of machining, creating different types of shapes isn't an issue. Even the most complex external features are possible to be made, given the user approaches the machining process the correct way. Generally, machining can be used with wood, metal, and hard plastics. The precision of the tolerancing depends on the type of machining operation. Turning, milling, and drilling can be more precise if they have positional displays. Other machining equipment, such as a bandsaw, could be less precise since they don't have this feature. Cost is generally high considering the machinery is not cheap and amount of man-hours per part is higher than other manufacturing processes.
There are a multitude of joining processes, yet they are all used for the same purpose, which is to take two separate pieces and fix them permanently to a larger functioning whole. One way to do this is by welding, where two or more parts are heated and stuck together, causing the joined parts to function as one. In some molding methods, filler material is added to make the merging of the materials easier. During the brazing process, a filler metal is melted and distributed between multiple solid metal components after the metals being joined have been heated. The filler metal must have a melting point that is above 840 degrees Fahrenheit, but below the melting point of the base metals. The metals joined in brazing must also have high fluidity and wettability. Soldering is similar to brazing, the only real difference being that in soldering, the melting point of the filler metal is below 840 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, no melting of the base metals occur, but the filler metal wets and combines with the base metals to form a metallurgical bond. There are many shapes that require joining, as there are different ways to attach things. There are also many materials that are used to join objects. Joining combines two different shapes rather than creating a new shape profile. Joining is predominantly used between metals, and is also a very quick and cost-effective way to combine different types of materials.
Finishing is usually done after a piece is cut, shaped, and sanded. Finishing has a few purposes. Usually, it's used to make sure the material won't get worn or damaged, as well as providing it an aesthetic. Finishing solutions usually come in liquid form, such as resin or epoxy, which coats the material. Depending on the need, this can provide resistance to corrosion of the underlying material when in contact with water, light, or outside chemicals. Finishing is a process that does not build its own shape profile. Finishing a liquid that solidifies on the surface, covers, and takes shape of the piece. Finishes are often used on wood and metals. Finishing is decently inexpensive because resins are usually cheap and often not wasted. The time needed to finish a piece depends on the resin or epoxy being used. Most slower finishes take around 4 hours, whereas some of the longer processes can exceed the time of 24 hours. The initial pouring or spreading of the finishing solution is minimal compared to the time needed to wait for the solution to solidify.
As you can see, there is lots to be made with manufacturing. Just listen to these satisfied customers.
This is fantastic.
I feel more comfortable having them.
This I could stick with, definitely. I like this stuff, it's good.
Why wouldn't I want something faster and healthier?
It's nice.
Call now.